Hello everyone and welcome to today's best of 3 match. In today's video I am playing 3 King Fighting, which is Slithering, Koraidon, and Okie Dokie, while my opponent is playing Heavy Metal, featuring Arch Alodon and Copper Raja as his beast. Now, given that there are only 3 basics in my deck, it's given that I will mulligan at least a couple of times. Luckily, I did not mulligan too many times, and I find Okie Dokies to start with in my first match. This deck always wants to go first so you can get that first manual attachment to Okie Dokie, so that is what I'm doing in this game. I start my turn playing Acrobike and I find Robosub and I don't know. I grab the Robosub and put it on my bench. Now, hopefully I don't forget about this card later. That would be unfortunate. Then I play Trainer's Mail. Off of Trainer's Mail I find Vessel, Marnie, and Hisuian Heavy Ball. I decide to go grab the Hisuian Heavy Ball because it will let me know very early on what is prized, and if I'm missing something like Koraidon or Slithering, I can get it immediately. So that is what I plan to do. And it's a good thing that I did. I play the Hisuian Heavy Ball and I find Koraidon in there. So now I have a secondary attacker that I can start powering up on my bench. And then I attach energy for turn. It will be a fighting energy onto my Okie Dokie, and that is the end of my turn, and I pass it over to my opponent. And my opponent immediately starts his turn off with an Arven and immediately grabs that Buddy Poffin. Now, since his Meltan is his active, he only has 2 other targets, being Jirachi and Beldum, and I'm expecting to see those come down. And he is going to go get a free retreat tool as well, so he can go into Jirachi to use that Stellar Guidance to look at the top 5 cards of his deck. And Buddy Poffin does indeed get his Jirachi and Beldum out. Metang is the core of his deck, so getting that into play as soon as possible is very, very, very important. Now he is going to free retreat into that Rachi and use the Stellar Guidance. And with the Stellar Guidance, he finds some pretty interesting cards. He finds Hisuian Heavy, Metal Goggles, Barney, Lusamine, but he is very highly considering Marnie, and he grabs it. Honestly, I'm thrilled. My hand has a research in it, and Twin Energy, which I don't want to play. I want to find a Dark Energy to power up my Okie Dokie. So I'm hoping he plays it, but instead he just attaches Shield Energy to his Meltan and passes, waking up his Jirachi too. I top deck Lily's Pokeball and immediately play it, but I'm in a really annoying spot right now. I could risk not attaching energy to Cryon and just ripping up a research, and instead I decide, you know what, he's not gonna attack immediately, so I have time to set up myself. So I put the Cape of Toughness onto Okie Dokie, giving it plus 50 HP. I put the Twin Energy on Koraidon and rip the research. I find Artisan off of research, but I decide not to play it because at this point in time it's gonna help my opponent more than me. So that is a pass going into my opponent. My opponent finds Kufant off his top deck and plays Timer Ball, getting 1 evolution, which of course is going to be Metang, but no, it's Melmetal. I don't know why he didn't go for Meltang unless he has an out to it in his hand. And you'll see if he does. Oh, he just has it in his hand. Great. He is going to use Metal Maker, and let's see how many he hits. 2 energies, and that is a fully powered up Melmetal, which I hate to see because his first attack, though it only does 80 damage, prevents Melmetal from being attacked with Pokemon with abilities, and Okie Dokie has an ability, and he's the only guy I want to be attacking with right now. My opponent plays a Colress, which is a shuffle draw 6 in this situation because I have 2 Pokédolls sitting on my bench, and off of that Colress's he finds Quick Ball, discarding N and allowing him to get his Duraludon out. That's the last piece of his board he needs. He is then going to pay for retreat go into his Melmetal and swing for 80 damage, but most importantly, being immune to Okidogi so I can't attack with him. I find Karina as my top deck, and that's pretty nice looking right here. I could play it, get my Slithering out, and get either an energy or a switching option, which switch card was the first one that came to mind. I find the Slithering, immediately bench him because I know that's what I'm gonna do, and then I look at my hand, looking at what resources I have. I know I have Earthen Vessel, so I don't need to search for an energy, but I definitely need a way to get Okidogi out of the active. Got switch card, but I'm looking for other options, and I find Scoop Up Net. And Scoop Up Net here is a pretty decent option. It will discard the fighting energy and Cape of Toughness on my Okidogi, but it keeps the switch card live for late game, which I think will be more beneficial. So I put Scoop Up Net in my hand and I play Earthen Vessel, discarding Artisan to get the last two fighting out of my deck. Luckily, none of them were prized. And one of them is immediately going to go onto that Slithering, so I can stomp off the top card of my opponent's deck. And I use the Scoop Up Net, picking up Okidogi. Now I have Field Blower in hand too, and it would be fun to get rid of Floatstone, but I am saving it for Lux Cape because Lux Cape on a Copperaja after my Field Blower is gone sucks. And Stomp Off hits Ultra Ball. Not something crazy, but you know, decent enough. My opponent starts with a Metal Maker just so he sees what his options are, but completely whiffs, which is wonderful news for me. I do not want another attacker powered up soon. He does have to manual attach to Melmetal still to get a KO on my Slitherwing, but I am glad he whiffed the opportunity to power up his Kufon or Arch Alodon on the bench. That is what my opponent is debating right now. Does he just manual attach to Melmetal? And he does. Then he plays a Cynthia to shuffle his hand back into his deck and draw a fresh 6 cards. And here he is looking for Metal Lab. Metal Lab plus the shield energy reduces damage by 40, which means he would live my Koraidon's fully powered up 180 damage attack. My opponent flies Copperaja, evolves it into play, and benches his Magearna. My opponent takes the KO on the Slithering, and I promote up my Koraidon. He is fully powered up and has the kill on the Melmetal since my opponent whiffed the Metal Lab. I play Night Stretcher, get Slithering back into play, and put Blend Energy on Okidogi, who now gets plus 100 attack and 100 HP. And I take the KO, deciding to hold my hand. Field Blower is still a really good thing to hold in this point in time. My opponent promotes his really chunky Copperaja, hoping for a crazy good Metang hit. My opponent plays Evil Incense, gets that Archalodon out, and now my opponent is fully on board. So even if my opponent whiffs the Metang full power up of the Copperaja, if he gets at least one, his Copperaja will have free retreat. And he does find at least one. That's how this deck operates, baby. And that gives his Copperaja free retreat. And he manual attaches his energy for turn onto that Copperaja as well. Now he is only 2 energy away from attacking, and he uses the Metal Bridge to retreat his Copperaja to the bench and use Jirachi's Stellar Wish, find a trainer for the top of his deck, which is going to be Raihan, and he plays it immediately because he hasn't played a supporter for turn yet. Raihan means Copperaja is down 1 energy away from being powered up, and if he hadn't already retreated this turn, a Metal Salsa would do the trick to fully power up his Copperaja. So let's see what card he does end up grabbing. Energy Recycler is the card he is considering the most. He has 3 energy in his discard, and though it's not a full power up 5, it will make Metal Maker more consistent, and that is what my opponent decides to go for, shuffling his deck back together, and he passes turn. Flipping heads once again, that Jirachi never sleeps. And my turn, I start off with drawing a Professor's Letter, and I look at the options I have in hand. I can power up the Okidogi with the fighting energy, and that's what I am deciding upon. I also have Penny in hand, which I've been looking at as my only way to retreat Koraidon. I don't want to pay for retreat, but I also know I can't reattach that twin energy to Koraidon this turn because I just manual attached to Okidogi. I play the penny, picking up Koraidon and the twin energy attached to him as well, and promote the Ogi McDogi, rebenching that Koraidon. I take the KO on Jirachi. My opponent starts his turn off promoting Hoparaja and cycling 3 energy back with the energy recycler. That's gonna help his Metang hit more frequently, but it's not a fully charged up energy recycler, so we'll see how good it does. He uses Metal Maker and hits 2, so he is able to put 1 on Hoparaja and 1 on his Archealdon, powering up a backup attacker. Now his Hoparaja is absolutely terrifying right now, especially since he can choose not to attack next turn to do a clean 230, taking a KO on my Okidogi. He powers up his Archealdon with manual attachment for turn, puts Minnow Goggles on the Hoparaja, and that is a dead Okidogi. I look at my hand and I make the biggest blunder of history. I had 2 little guys on the bench that could have easily have gone up and bought me time to power up my Slithering to use the second attack, because right now I need to get energy on Slithering. But I go into my Slithering saying, oh yeah, I got this. I just need to attack with Slithering once and stomp off the first card of his deck, and then I can attack with Koraidon to get a KO when it's not a KO. But I haven't yet realized this, and I go on my merry way playing Tag Call, getting Goose Hala and Sunland out of my deck, and I play Goose Hala, discarding the Sunland and Hisuian Heavy Ball to look at what I can play. I have Brooklet Hill deck, unfortunately no Pokestop. Pokestop would have been really good here, but it's prized. I grab Luxcape as my tool option, and I'm looking between Prism Energy and DCE for energy. I grab the Prism Energy because that's the way I can power up my little Slithering to attack this turn, and that is what I opt for. I then realize, oh wait, Stadium didn't matter too much because I can't even play Stadium with Hoparaja in the active, and I manual attach the Prism Energy to my Slithering and then suddenly realize I do not have enough damage on Koraidon to kill. I really needed to go into a Pokédoll so I could have 2 turns to power it up so I can double attack with damage for the kill on the Hoparaja. Instead I am stuck here in the active, stomping off the top card of his deck and doing basically nothing. So I stomp off, discarding, at least it's a good discard, Crystal Cave from the opponent's deck. My opponent starts his turn with a Metal Maker, and it whiffs, which is wonderful for me to see. I mean, he's still only 1 energy away from powering up his Archealdon, and his Hoparaja has free retreat because of Archealdon's ability, so I'm still very much dead in this situation. But at least I have Twin Energy in hand to power up Hoparaja if he decides to go into Archealdon, because that will take a clean KO. There's no damage reduction on his Archealdon if he decides to swing with it, so that is at least a consolation prize for my poor self who put myself in this sorry state. And that is exactly what happens. No point in going to my Pokédolls if I know I'm immediately going into my Koraidon. Unfortunately, in this point in time, a Luxcape would not prevent Hoparaja from KOing me. In fact, it would speed my opponent along in his prize trade. I manual attach Twin Energy to Koraidon for turn, and I look at my hand. There is nothing I can really play here. I can play Brooklet Hill, but that's not doing anything because I have hit 0 ways to recycle Pokemon cards back into my deck, and I just swing and I take a KO on Archealdon, at least getting a prize card. And as my opponent says,
my hand is immaculate.
Just like me, he is pretty low on spendable resources. He has at least an energy he can attach to Magearna. That Spike Draw for 20 and Draw 2 could get him out of a sticky situation if I am able to manage to kill his Hoparaja, which is very unlikely. He considers using Metang, but he's pretty sure he knows exactly where every single one of his metal energies is, so he decides not to use it and just KOs Koraidon forcing me to promote the Lily's Pokédoll. Now I do top deck the Guzma here, which is something I highly consider, but I do not recall if Pokestop is in my deck, and I feel like it is, so I play Culver's Tenacity, and in fact it is very much prized, and I am very much dead in this situation. I can get DCE at least, but my game has crumbled before me, especially because of that misplay. That is basically my turn. I pass, hoping to find something. My opponent's not going to take prize cards for taking KOs on my Lily's Pokédoll. My opponent plays a Nest Ball, looking at his option, and he finds Dialga. He still has ways to attack and stuff, but at this point the game is very much over. He uses Metang because he realizes he still has one energy in his deck, but he whiffs it. At this point in time, he is thinking about finding that Metagross, especially if I do manage to get a Pokemon back into play. Metagross would be really good. He really starts charging up his Dialga, so it could be ready to attack next turn even if I manage to kill his Copperajah. He plays Morty's Conviction, discarding a Metal Energy and drawing one card, which isn't too terrible in his opinion. He takes out my Lily's Pokédoll, forcing me into my Robo Sub. I rescue Stretcher top deck, and I can get back Ogie McDogie, but not so fast. I realize that I have Nest Ball in hand, so instead of just grabbing Ogie and putting on my bench, I decide to use Rescue Stretcher to put all three of my little guys back in, finally, and I'll use Nest Ball to go grab back Ogie McDogie. And I have Luxcape, if you didn't know, so I am no longer getting one shot by Copperajah, and attach the Aura Energy I have in my hand onto it, discarding the Professor's Letter because that is very much a dead card at this point in time. So now I could sit behind the Robo Sub, buy one more turn for me to potentially set up and get my Okidogi back online, or I could play Guzma. So not only can I play stadiums from my hand, including that Brooklet Hill, and get another basic out, but now I have stuck his Metang, who has 2 retreat in the active when I know my opponent is very low on energy resources, and I use Brooklet Hill to go and get Slithering back out. And that is a pass from me, going to my opponent, who top decks his final Metal Energy. But our Jalodon is done, so that's not going to do too much for him. He can attach to Dialga, so we have a secondary attacker up, and has his Field Blower in hand. So I lose the Brooklet Hill, and I lose the extra health on my Okidogi, which I really needed. And then plays an Iono, giving me a fresh new 3 cards, which aren't too shabby, but my opponent is stuck in the active. He passes. I top deck my Koraidon, and he goes onto my bench. And now here, I actually have a pretty decent hand. I have both of my HP increasing tools left, so I put the Bravery Charm on Okidogi, increasing it to 280 HP, and on my Koraidon as well, which inadvertently gets it out of range for Copperajah to easily one-shot it. Now my opponent top decks the Guzma here, and he has quite the choice to make. He can no longer one-shot my Koraidon with Copperajah because of the belt. He can't one-shot Slithering because he has 140 HP, and my Okidogi is inactive. So, as a compromise, he goes into Magearna, pulling up my Slithering, and uses Spike Draw to do 20 damage, soften up my Slithering for that Copperajah, and draw 2 more additional cards. Unfortunately for him, in the hand he Iono'd me to, I had Switch Cart, so I am able to heal off the Slithering and put up my Chonky Okidogi and pass once more. The ball is in my opponent's court. I am just waiting for an energy out at this point to start attacking, so I can't do very much. Now my opponent here is contemplating a lot. Does he use Manual Retreat and go into Copperajah? And he ends up going for a Tate and Liza switch, putting the Copperajah in the active, and decides to play Metal Lab as well. That does 30 damage reduction, which sucks from my point of view, but he just goes for his first attack without tapping, getting a solid 130 damage on me, so he can attack next turn and swing for a KO with the tap. I don't have anything, so I pass, and my opponent now has to decide what he wants to do. He plays Lucamine for turn, getting back that Guzma he played, as well as Raihan, both very much game-winning cards in this scenario, because if he kills my Okidogi, he can use Guzma to guarantee himself a pretty good KO follow-up the next turn. And honestly, once I saw the Guzma come back to hand, I felt like I didn't have too much of a chance getting back into this game. My opponent takes the KO on the Okidogi, tapping his Caparaja so it can't attack next turn, and I go into my Slitherwing. He is chunky. I top deck Trekking Shoes, which finds me a Rainbow Energy, and I use it to power up my little Slitherwing, and I defiantly stomp off the top card of my opponent's deck. And here, I expect my opponent to play Guzma to steal up the deal, but instead he just plays Malilana purely for the switch, pays for retreat with his 1 retreat cost Magearna, and swings with Caparaja once again for KO and the game. Now for our second match, it started off, well, with a lot of friendly mulligans, and it got to a point where my opponent just decided he wasn't going to take any mulligans and we just wanted to set up and play the game. Once again, I am going first. Going first is preferred in my fighting list because I need that manual attachment to Okidogi, so we always have me go first and him going second in the matches because that's what both decks want. Now, when I finally have a Pokemon I can play, it is Okidogi, which is an excellent starter. And I also have Sub in hand, which is a really good sign as well. My opponent starts Magearna, which is pretty good as well. I have Brooklet Hill though, and I'm going to immediately use it and go search for my little guys, Slitherwings and deck, and we're just looking for that Koraidon, and he's prized. So I just go for the Slitherwing. I now know if I want to play a supporter, I want to go and get Arven as soon as possible for that Hisuian Heavy Ball to get that Koraidon back out. And I play Robosub as well to give me a good pivot, and I have Rainbow Energy to immediately activate Okidogi's ability, and I pass to my opponent. That was a very good turn 1. My opponent starts off with a Quick Ball, discarding a Metal Energy and checking his deck as well. I'm expecting maybe a Baby Duraludon, Jirachi, or Beldum to come out at this point in time, depending on what cards he has in deck. And my opponent ends up going for the Jirachi, which means he is searching for cards to continue to set up. It's really good early starter. Both Magearna and Jirachi tend to be pretty good for that. Now my opponent has Escape Rope in hand. That is an easy push for me. Robosob is really nice to have in this point in time, and my opponent uses Stellar Wish and finds Gladion. And with Gladion, he can get whatever he needs to off of prize cards. Maybe a piece that is missing if he's missing a Pokemon line, and it turns out he just goes and grabs Cynthia because he really needs draw in his hand at this point in time, so he uses his Gladion this turn to make sure he has at least a hopefully better hand next turn, and that is a manual attachment to Magearna for turn and a pass with his Jirachi waking up. That guy never sleeps. I have Arven in hand, and I know immediately I'm going for that Hisuian Heavy Ball and probably an HP boosting tool. For a moment there, I consider Escape Rope, but Hisuian Heavy Ball is what I want. I need that Koraidon out as soon as possible, and I get Bravery Charm. I'm not going for Lux Cape too early, because I would rather him burn his Field Blower on Bravery Charm to get a KO and save Lux Cape for later in the game. Now I attach that to Oogie McDogie and I play Hisuian Heavy Ball, finding that stinking Koraidon who loves to sleep in the prize cards. Now all I need is one more energy and I can start swinging and KOing with Okidogi, and I do have the fighting energy in my hand. I also play Pokestop. Brooklet Hill's now dead and I use it finding Lily's Pokédoll, which I bench immediately. I sack my Robo-Sub, go into Okie Dokie, and I take a KO, getting a prize card. Now my opponent really needs to get something off of his Cynthia or his top deck to get his board set up so he's not just wiped out next turn. And off of his Cynthia, he finds nothing, so he Pokestops and prays and he sacks everything, and that is the game. He finds no other Pokemon, meaning I take prize next turn, and that is the duality of both of our decks. Not super consistent all the time, meaning that sometimes that just happens. I am once again starting with Okie Dokie and going first. However, this time my hand isn't looking as good. I top deck Green Exploration, which any other time of the week would have been a wonderful sight to see. However, since I started Okie Dokie, who has an ability, it is a dead card. I start my turn off with a Hisuian Heavy Ball, and I'm glad to see that none of my guys are prized, which is slightly unfortunate because now I have no guy to put on my bench. I have Rainbow Energy once again to power up my Okie Dokie, taking 10 damage, and I also have Lux Cape, which I debate about playing immediately, but I look at my opponent's board state. He doesn't have immediate pressure, so I decide to hold it in my hand and pass to my opponent. My opponent gets to start with an Arvin. He has Buddy Buddy as an option, and he also can get a free retreat tool at this point in time as well. He plays Buddy Buddy Poffin, and he finds Floatstone as his retreat option. He puts Floatstone to his hand and uses Buddy Buddy Poffin. I'm expecting a Drachi and a Meltan to come down. However, he only finds Meltan, which he benches. Meltan and Melmetal are a great counter to my Okie Dokie, so unless I am able to quickly put on pressure with a fast Okie Dokie, this could be a very devastating board state very soon if my opponent is able to evolve and attack with his Melmetal. He manual attaches to Magearna and uses Spike Draw to draw 2 cards and do 20 damage to my Okie Dokie, putting me at 30 damage. I have Energy Lotto. I held it from last turn, praying that I can get any energy so I can start attacking, but I whiff. I see Koraidon. I would have loved to have Koraidon in my hand, but instead he's getting shuffled back into my deck, and I have no idea when next I am going to be able to attack. And I look at my options once again. I decide to put the Lux Cape on now that he has a slightly better board, and I pass my turn over to my opponent, who starts his turn off with an Ultra Ball, getting Metang. And I'm expecting him to use Metang immediately unless he has other options to thin his deck, because an early Dialga could actually put on some serious hurt. My opponent plays Trainer's Mail. Nest Ball is a really good find though, and with that Nest Ball he can go and get either his Copperajah Kufant baby or Duraludon out to start whatever guy he wants up next, and that is going to be a Kufant to power up his tankiest attacker, Copperajah. My opponent uses Metal Maker, but he whiffs once again, and that is really good for me since I have no idea when I'm next going to get another Pokemon on my board, and seeing him not have a powered up board feels really good. He Spike Straw once again. I am stacking up damage pretty fast, and he draws 2 cards, but I top deck Fighting Energy, allowing me to good punch and date a KO. My hand is still super dead though, so I am praying for a decent top deck. My opponent goes into Metang, whiffs another Metal Maker, which is very good for me, but really bad for my opponent. He benches Duraludon and plays Evolution Incense, allowing him to get his Elephant out of the deck. My opponent debates about playing a supporter to shuffle my hand and give me something new, but I'm in such a dead hand, he doesn't want to do anything. My opponent plays Floatstone to give his Metang free retreat, then puts down the Full Metal Lab, reducing damage to his Pokemon by 30, and plays a Blessed Marnie. My hand was super dead, and this hand, though okay, is a lot better. I got Karino and I have Goosehala. I have options to get my guys out. My opponent free retreats into his Copperajah, which he attached to his manual energy for turn 2, and puts a U-turn board on Meltan, passing his turn to me. I start my turn off with Ocarina. I know immediately I can go get Slithering or Koraidon if my heart so desires, and an item card which could easily get my other Pokemon out, or just energy because I have no energy in hand. So I am debating about just going for Professor's Letter at this point in time to guarantee me at least 2 energy in my hand to slowly power up my guys over time, and that is what I end up doing. I grab this Slithering and I use Professor's Letter to get 2 fighting out of my deck and attach one to my Slithering for turn. And I can attack doing 140 damage with my Ogie Dogie, which is still not going to one-shot. My opponent can still switch out and heal up all those damage if he so happens to find a Malilana, but attacking is better than nothing. My opponent draws for turn and starts off with Metal Maker once again. A really good Metal Maker here could spell definite destruction for me, and he gets a 3-hit, means his Copperajah is now fully powered up and can do 230 damage. He also slams down his own Lux Cape and uses Cynthia to shuffle draw 6 cards. I am very, very sad in this point in time. He can do 230 damage, which isn't quite enough for a KO. I would barely live, but that spike draw damage certainly added up. My opponent plays Tremor Ball, gets 1 heads, means he can go get Arch Alodon, so he has free retreat on all his guys who have a metal energy attached to them. My opponent plays a Hisuian Heavy Ball to go get that Slacker Jirachi, and finding multiple of his metal energies stuck in his prize cards. He manual attaches for turn to Dialga, and his board is looking quite pretty. And my opponent is in a slight conundrum here. He can use his Nasal Lariat attack for 130, or he could use it for 230, putting me 50 damage shy of a KO. And in this instance, he decides to go for the 230 damage. He has Archalodon online now, so he can pivot into someone like Dialga next turn and clean up a KO, saving the Copperajah from going down. Now I drop my top deck and I find Rescue Stretcher. I also have Night Stretcher in hand, and I have Goose Hala. Unfortunately, I can't bump Stadium because there's a freaking Copperajah in the active, but at least I can power up my Slithering to actually use its second attack for once in its life. Now I do 140 more damage to Copperajah, putting it at 280. It's living by just a little hair, and my opponent plays Roto Stick, finds both Guzma and Iona, which he can put into his hand, giving him plenty of options of what to do. Guzma here would really suck. I have spent so much time powering up my little Slitherwing, I would not like it to go down. Now my opponent free retreats into Jirachi just so he can see a little more options before he rips a supporter for turn, such as the Guzma he found before. Now off of this, such as Metal Goggles, Evo Incense, Quick Ball, Raihan, and Via Seeker, all of them very tempting for different reasons. And here he checks his resources, see what kind of supporters he can get with Via Seeker, but ultimately decides to grab Raihan, which will let him pivot into a better attacker once Copperajah or someone else goes down. Now he uses Metang after his deck has been thinned a bit, hoping for a good hit with Metal Energy, and hits at least one. This can go to his Archalodon so it has free pivot, or to his Dialga so it's one away from attacking. And that is what he decides to do, power up that Dialga so it's close to attacking. Emmanuel attaches Dialga, now he's fully powered up, which is a bit of a misplay because my opponent realizes he does not have enough damage to one-shot Slithering with Dialga, so when he plays Guzma, he has to go into Copperajah instead and tap him at that to do 230 damage to take the KO. Oh, my poor little Slithering, I spent 2 turns to power up. I am not very happy about that. But luckily, I have plenty of ways to get energy and Pokemon back into play. I have Night Stretcher and Rescue Stretcher. I decided to use Rescue Stretcher to put Slithering back onto my bench. I use Raihan to go attach one of the fighting energies onto him and get any card from my deck, which I end up going for Field Blower to get rid of his Lux Cape and take a mid-turn KO and get rid of his Full Metal Lab. My opponent promotes their Meltan, who has free retreat, and off of the prizes I find Robosub, which I immediately bench. Having a little guy to throw around is good. And then I debate about playing Night Stretcher to get the second fighting energy in my discard and power up my Slithering once again, and that is what I decide to do. And then I use Okidogi as my attack dog to take the KO on Meltan and getting 2 prizes in 1 turn while devastating my opponent's board state. My opponent promotes his Metang, who has free retreat, and starts his turn off with a Raihan accelerating an energy onto Arjalodon and searching his deck for any card of his choosing. And that's going to be Super Rod. With Super Rod, he can get back his Copper Raja and a Metal Energy. After playing Super Rod and shuffling all those cards back into his deck, my opponent rips a Metal Maker, hoping to hit at least 1 Metal Energy, which he does. Now his Arjalodon is only 1 energy attachment away from being able to attack, and look, there it is! My opponent free retreats into the Arjalodon, and now he can use his attack to take 2 prizes and a KO. But before he does that, he puts U-turn board on Darachi, and that is my Okidogi and 2 prizes taken on my opponent's turn. Now I could promote my sub, or I could go into Slithering, and I decide to go into my sub, and that is my final decision. I top deck Nest Ball, which is huge because that means my Koraidon is now able to come out of the deck. I have access to Goose Hala as well, which means I can go get double colorless or twin energy to fully power up my Koraidon to start putting pressure on after attacking with my Slithering. Everything is falling into place, and with Goose Hala I can use Pokestop to start digging through my deck and searching for recovery options. I put Fighting Fury Belt on my benched Koraidon, and I used Goose Hala, sacking my entire hand to get Twin Energy, Pokestop, and Cape of Toughness. I can burn all these cards this turn if I so desire, and I start off by attaching Twin Energy to hand, holding the Cape of Toughness, and playing Pokestop, which I immediately use. Seeing Iono and Marnie go down the drain kinda hurt a little bit, and here I am really contemplating about going to Slithering and using his attack. If I use it as attack, I will have 90 damage on me, and I'm not going to one-hit KO the Arjalodon, but I decide to go for it anyways since my Koraidon will now be powered up to use his first attack for 180 damage. And I do 90 damage to myself. My opponent does not recover from burn, but with Arjalodon's free retreat ability, that doesn't matter too much. My opponent drops a Field Blower, which sucks, but I still have Cape of Toughness in my hand, so it's not the worst thing in the world. But I hated seeing that Pokestop go, because at that moment in time, that was my way I was getting through my deck. My opponent drops a Malalona, sacking 2 cards from his hand, and going into Dialga, who now can take an easy KO on the weakened Slitherwing. And here my opponent goes for Metal Maker, whiffing it, which I like to see, but to be fair, his board is already very well established and set up. After taking stock of his remaining Metal Energy, my opponent decides to attach a Metal Energy to his Metang, and then attacks with Dialga, taking a KO on the active Slithering for another prize. My top deck is VS Seeker, which I use to go grab Marnie, so I play the Marnie, but only after I do Cape of Toughness, shuffling my opponent's hand away and getting a fresh new 5 cards for myself. Unfortunately, that is not a recovery tool. I have Palpad at least, so I can put Raihan back in, and potentially one other supporter of choice, maybe a draw supporter. And that is what I end up doing. I shuffle back in Raihan and Marnie, and I'm hoping to survive at least one more turn. I will not go down because of the Cape of Toughness I put on my Koraidon. Arjalodon does not have KO, but unless this next top deck is a way for me to recover a Pokemon, I am in very sticky situation. I use Koraidon's first attack, which is powered up to 180 damage to take a KO, and my opponent finds Quick Ball to go and get his baby elephant once again. I did not want to deal with another Copper Raja, And unfortunately, it looks like that is the way this game is going to go. My opponent attaches Middle Goggles to Argalodon and uses Tantalizer to shuffle draw 5 cards. Off of Tantalizer, my opponent does find Via Seeker and Escape Rope, which can push my Koraidon back active if I try to go into something else. My opponent uses Metal Maker once again, but whiffs, finding no metal energy in sight. My opponent manual attaches to his Kufon, uses Metal Saucer. Now his little elephant is only 1 energy away from being fully powered up once again, and my opponent free retreats into Argalodon and uses its attack Iron Blaster to do 160, meaning next turn if he finds that Caparaja or a Guzma, I die. So I decide to go out on my own terms and play Penny because I am out of any way to recycle Pokemon, and I sincerely believe that I was going to die sooner rather than later. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to share it with a friend and let me know which deck you like better. Do you like the 3 King Fighting deck or do you like the Heavy Metal deck? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you guys all in next week's video. Bye!